This interview with Curtis Yarvin was part of our course at the Unregistered Academy on James Burnham's The Managerial Revolution. If you would like to become a member of the Unregistered Academy so that you can attend courses like this, go to patreon.com/unregistered. If you would like to hang out with Curtis Yarvin over a weekend, go to thaddeusrussell.com/Chicago to buy tickets for the upcoming Unregistered Live in Chicago, October 21st to the 23rd, at which Curtis Yarvin will be the featured special guest. So again, go to patreon.com/unregistered to become a member of the Unregistered Academy. And if you would like to join us in Chicago with Curtis Yarvin, go to thaddeusrussell.com/Chicago. I hope to see you soon. This is the Unregistered Podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. This is a show about ideas, people, and behaviors that are considered inappropriate, out of bounds, or beyond the pale. The things you're not supposed to talk about if you're a school teacher, a college professor, a businessman, a politician, a parent, a neighbor, or even a podcast host. These are the things you're not supposed to say or even think if you're a good liberal, a good conservative, or a good citizen. Each week, I'll interview a person who has something bad to say. They might be a journalist or a professor. They might be a porn star or a drug dealer. They might just be an ordinary person with an ordinary job who doesn't care about the rules of polite society. I'm not interested in breaking the rules just to be a troublemaker. I'm interested in people who break the rules of conventional thought and to expand the scope of what is possible to say in our society. I'm interested in people who make me think. I am joined from the great state of California by one Curtis Yarvin, known to many here and elsewhere, as one of the, I'd say, most important intellectuals of our time, frankly. I've told you that before. And I'm so glad you're here to help us understand. This is a part of the Unregistered Academy. This is a course on James Burnham's The Managerial Revolution, which I've been hearing this book referenced time and again recently. Mm-hmm. I'd say over the last couple of years, I've heard this book referenced more than any other on podcasts that I listened to, and I became quite intrigued. I had never read it before. And since I was not a right winger until sort of recently, and I guess I'm not even now, but I just wasn't part of the canon. So I know that Burnham is very important to you in your thinking, and I've been told that, and I've seen it in your writing. And I guess I want to just start with, can you tell us how James Burnham and this book in particular is important to you, or why it's important to you? How can you remember when you first read it?
Sure. I think I read The Managerial Revolution in my Austrian phase, and for a reason I sort of want to go into. I think the book sort of contains, it's sort of almost right, but it contains this very, very crucial error, which is essentially the difference between a manager and a bureaucrat. And so, let's sort of get into that later. But, the thing is, I sort of read this book and I was like, there's something right and interesting here, and maybe something not quite right. And then I read his previous book, The Machiavellians, which is one of the, it's sort of, have you read The Machiavellians?
No.
It's like the first book in political science that I recommend to anyone. And in a way it's good because it's sort of in Managerial Revolution or still more Suicide of the West. I feel like Burnham is kind of descending into the weeds in a way. And The Machiavellians is his most abstract book and therefore sort of his most interesting. His specific judgments, I find, often do not really stand the test of time, but his abstractions are really, really wonderful. So I basically discovered, when I read The Machiavellians, which I found this like random, I think the first paperback edition or whatever, I believe I gave it away to some bigwig and no longer have it. And it's of the Machiavellians, and I just discovered this book and I started relentlessly popularizing it. And it's fortunately been reprinted now, but it's like copies of this were selling for like thousands of dollars. There has to be like a way to monetize this effect somehow. But the Machiavellians is, I would encourage anyone who likes the Managerial Revolution to read the Machiavellians, but we're not here to talk about the Machiavellians. We're here to talk about the book that you all actually have read, which is the Managerial Revolution. So do you want, Thaddeus, do you want me to start by explaining my objection to the Managerial Revolution? Or should I start with you boosting the book or introducing the book or some way, or sketching Burnham's life story, which either of us, I think.
Yeah, let me start with that. Let me introduce Burnham in the book just in general terms, and then
Awesome.
I want to hear your take on it. So James Burnham published this book in 1941. Before we started recording, I was telling people that he was, and Curtis, you don't know this, he was a member of the same Trotskyist faction that my parents were. My parents were Shachtmanites. And
gotcha. Yeah.
Like one generation after him, like about 20 years after they joined it.
Right.
So, and that's very, very important, right? And so Burnham was a Trotskyist Marxist of a particular bent all the way through the 1930s. In fact, he didn't renounce Marxism until 1940, the year before this book was published. He obviously wrote this book before the United States entered the war, just before. So that's also something to bear in mind here. And he was a professor of philosophy at New York University. In fact, he was the chair of the department there for many years. I think that his move from Marxism into whatever he became, sort of a tribune of the right, is interesting in that I think you can see a lot of Marxist terminology, categories, and concepts even in the book still, even though he's now renouncing Marxism. And I think I want to focus on that quite a bit because I do think that's important. Yeah. Anything else you want to add about Burnham?
I mean, later he's of course one of the founders of the National Review, right. And he, a formerly distinguished publication. And so he's of the generation, of Buckley, and Buckley can be an interesting writer, but I don't think anything Buckley wrote really stands up to Burnham's best work. And Buckley is fundamental. I mean, he defines, of course, the post-World War II, conservative. So in a way, it's like almost, for me, peak Burnham is sort of the moment of his like conversion. I think the Machiavellians is like 38 or something. I forget the exact date, but it's before the Managerial Revolution, I'm pretty sure. And it's basically, so it's sort of closer to his like conversion into like something else. It's sort of the point at which his kind of thoughts are most general. And, to me, when I read the Managerial Revolution, I see, in some ways, it has this like embryonic, like Cold War sensibility of like he believes he doesn't really support the coming bureaucratic state, is that he doesn't really see an alternative to it exactly. And then, of course, the alternative would come to be a kind of proto-libertarian thinking, which is, I think, that's sort of the Cold War way of seeing these things. Okay, wait, it's individualism against bureaucracy, right? And that's a very compelling and sound, that's like the basis of the like National Review subscriber base from like 1950 to now, right? Do they still have subscribers? They still, oh yeah, they do, right? But yeah, the like very distinguished publication, but
hey, I have friends who work there.
Yes, yeah, no, that's why I'm saying, I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all. Someone was cracking me up the other day because he was using the term conventional Republican social life. And, somehow this had become associated with Madison Cawthorn, and it got sort of more risque from there. But I'm sure your friends lead a conventional Republican social life.
No. No, certainly not.
In any case, where were we? Oh, yes. So in any case, this is why I see sort of this, like Burnham and the Machiavellians. Burnham in the Managerial Revolution is a sociologist, and like Burnham in the Machiavellians is a historiographer. And basically, I think his sort of historiography and his political science are kind of the finest work that he did. And then in the Managerial Revolution, he adopts this, like, okay, this is what's happening whether you like it or not, and tone. And I don't know. I mean, I feel that the difference between a manager and a bureaucrat is something that is like not present in this work at all, and really, really, really needs to be understood.
Okay.
To get in its place.
Let's do that. So let's step back for a second.
Sure.
The analysis, right? He is kind of replacing, in a sense, the Marxist analysis, the Marxist class analysis of capitalism, or modern capitalism, modern liberal capitalism, as being a system in which there are two classes, the owners and the workers, and the owners have control until there's a socialist revolution, at which point the proletariat will have control. So those two classes, right? Bipolar world, I guess. He's saying, no, that's not actually the case. Capitalists have been losing their power, beginning especially with World War I. And it's interesting, he predicted that this process would culminate in the 1960s, and he might have been right about that, but that the capitalists have been losing their power, their control over the system, over society, to this new class, this new ruling elite of people he calls managers. And Curtis, you want to draw a distinction between managers and bureaucrats. I want to get into that in a second.
Sure.
And so he says that's been happening because of technological change, the emergence of mass scale industries, large enterprises that need managers to operate, right? That's just common sense. Once you do that, once you need managers to run your business, you end up ceding control, losing control to them, and they take control because people want power. So the owners end up, according to him, having less and less control, actually. And the final, I think this is right, for him, the final process by which this new ruling class of elites take over entirely is the public seizure, the state seizure of the means of production. So he's predicting the end of actual capitalism and replacing it with some form of socialism. Once the state controls the means of production, the managers who had established themselves as the rulers within these enterprises take over entirely, and they then have full sovereignty. Now, that, of course, hadn't happened as of 1941. I'd like to have a discussion with you and everyone here about whether that's ever happened, because I think there's a decent argument to be made that it has happened, that we're living in a society now, a system now, that is so thoroughly corporatist. The merger of private businesses with the state has become so complete that it is essentially a state-run operation, and the ruling elite, the managerial elite, is in fact sovereign today. And I would like to talk about the politics of today as it relates to this book. Did I do a decent job of summarizing his argument?
Yeah, that's I think a fair version of the argument as I know it. And there's something in rhetoric, it's sometimes called the skyhook, where you basically take one incorrect thing and you can sort of hang this entire sort of tissue of incorrectness on top of it. And I feel like the core thesis of the managerial revolution is kind of spoiled by an equivalence which is sort of used as a lemma all throughout the thinking in this book, and which is just really extremely not true. And from this extremely not true lemma, you can basically sort of derive almost anything. So your whole thesis falls apart. And the way I would describe the this particular skyhook is this difference between a manager and a bureaucrat.